welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're zeroing in on the ultimate authority figure of the Greek pantheon.
Zeus, the king himself.
Exactly. We've got a really compelling mix of material to explore here. There's a video giving a visual angle on his power, a very detailed breakdown from the Theoi project.
Oh yeah, that's a great resource.
And a blog post that gives a solid, accessible overview. Our goal is really to look beyond the usual lightning bolts.
Right, to really understand the nuances of his influence.
We want to unpack what made him the king of the gods, but also dig into some of the surprising limitations.
And the mysteries. There are definitely unanswered questions surrounding this iconic deity.
Totally. Okay, so let's start with the powers we all kind of associate with Zeus. The sources are pretty much on the same page about his, let's call them headline abilities.
Yeah, the big one.
He's the god of thunder and lightning. And that thunderbolt, it's more than just, a cool special effect in the myths.
Oh, absolutely. It's consistently shown as the symbol of immense power, divine judgment.
Capable of total destruction.
Right. And it's fascinating to think why lightning became so central to him. Maybe it's the unpredictable nature of it, that awe-inspiring power reflecting the gods themselves.
That's a great point. And his authority wasn't just about the elements, was it? He was king of the gods.
Which meant he held sway over all the other deities.
He could summon them, command them.
Punish them even if they stepped out of line. His decisions really shaped what happened on Olympus.
It does make you wonder, though, about that kingship. Was it just raw power? Or did he need some buy-in from the others, like some kind of tradition or consent?
That's a really interesting question. Definitely something to ponder.
Then there's the shape-shifting. Our sources detail his transformations into, all sorts of things. Animals, mortals.
Even inanimate objects, like that shower of gold for Danae.
Right. The swan for Leda, the bull for Europa. Quite the adaptable fellow, you could say.
It really speaks to how fluid the boundaries were, between the divine and mortal worlds in Greek myth, and how the gods could just intervene directly.
Okay. And he was also Lord of the Sky and Weather, more broadly.
Control over clouds, rain, wind, storms.
Imagine having that kind of influence over Earth's climate.
Well, think about ancient Greece, how vital agriculture and seafaring were.
Ah, yeah.
Good point. His control over the weather would have made him incredibly important in a practical sense. People would have revered him, but maybe feared him a little too.
Makes sense. And finally, among the big powers, he was seen as the protector of law and order.
Ensuring oaths were kept, treaties honored?
Yeah, breaking a promise. That could bring his divine wrath down on you. Gave him huge moral and social authority. The blog post mentions how important oaths were.
They even had a specific figure for oaths, Horkos. It shows how seriously they took commitments, with Zeus as the ultimate backstop. Divine punishment was a real possibility in their minds.
Okay, so that's the classic Zeus. Thunderbolts, kingship, shape-shifting, weather control, law enforcement. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Right, because the sources also point out some less obvious limitations and mysteries.
Exactly. The picture of Zeus as just this absolute, all-powerful ruler, it's not quite right.
No, not entirely. A key one was fate, the Moirai.
Even Zeus was bound by the destiny they spun.
He could try to navigate it, maybe nudge things a bit, but he couldn't fundamentally change it, which really makes you wonder what the Greeks thought the ultimate power was.
Exactly. The king of the gods reporting to someone or something else. It's fascinating.
Another point is his reliance on older powers, the primordial titans.
Yeah, some of his key stuff, like the thunderbolts themselves, seem to have come from or been granted by figures like the Cyclops.
During the Titanomachy, yeah, that great war that brought him to power.
And apparently his control over Tartarus, where the defeated Titans were locked up, was limited.
It suggests his authority wasn't, created out of nothing. It was built on the powers that came before, and maybe still constrained by them in some ways.
And this is wild, even his own wife, Hera.
Ah, Hera. She had considerable influence, didn't she?
Despite being king, Zeus wasn't immune to her causing chaos. There's that myth where she actually managed to bind him with help from other gods.
That really shows a surprising dynamic, doesn't it? Highlights how personal relationships, even for gods, could shape how power worked. Hera acting out of jealousy. It shows even supreme authority can be challenged.
Temporarily, at least.
Temporarily, yes.
Another constraint. His authority wasn't universal across the cosmos. He ruled the sky, Olympus.
But Poseidon had the seas, pretty much absolute power there.
And Hades ruled the underworld. Zeus couldn't just, waltz in and start giving orders in their domains.
That division of power after the Titanomachy created a kind of balance. Zeus was top dog, sure, but the other major gods had their own independent spheres.
Plus, big decisions on Olympus. They often seem to involve discussion, maybe even some consensus building.
Yeah, it wasn't always just Zeus decreeing things.
Suggests it wasn't a complete dictatorship up there.
Paints a picture of a more, well, maybe not collaborative, but certainly less autocratic council than you might think. He had to manage other powerful personalities.
And finally, the video mentions something about the gods' influence possibly diminishing over time as humanity evolved.
That's a really profound idea. Could divine power somehow fade as human progress and self-reliance grew?
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Is divine power tied to human belief?
What happens when human agency takes center stage? Big questions.
So yeah, when you look past the standard image, you get a Zeus who, okay, incredibly powerful, yes.
Definitely.
But he operated within limits. Fate, older forces, family drama, respecting his brother's turf.
And maybe even facing a slow decline in relevance.
It makes him much more complex.
Absolutely. More than just heroic myths. It becomes a story about power itself, its reach, its limits, the forces that shape it.
Which leads us nicely into some of the theories and, well, unanswered questions.
Yeah.
The video floats the idea of some power even beyond the fates.
Forces may be hinted at in mythology, but never fully laid out.
What do you make of that?
Well, it opens up really fascinating speculation, doesn't it, about how the Greeks saw the cosmos. If even fate wasn't the absolute last word, it suggests this deeper, maybe unknowable layer to reality that even the gods had to deal with.
Another theory is that Zeus himself evolved. His power wasn't static.
Right, it developed over time. His rise from, like, a basic thunder god to the king after the Titanomachy seems to back that up.
It paints him less as a given and more as someone whose position was earned, developed through conflict and change.
Adds dynamism to his character, for sure.
I also found the idea of humanization as a limitation really compelling. The Greek gods, Zeus included, they act so human.
Love, hate, jealousy, making mistakes.
Yeah. Could that be mythology's way of saying even the greatest power has flaws? Limitations baked into its very nature.
It's a strong interpretation. Giving gods human flaws might have been their way of exploring the imperfections of power itself, maybe offering lessons about leadership responsibility.
Or maybe just reflecting human nature back at themselves.
Could be. And then there's the really big one, with Zeus, a literal being.
Or more of an embodiment. Nature's forces, human aspirations, a symbol for the uncontrollable cosmos.
Yeah. That gets to the heart of what mythology is. Was he actively intervening? Or was he a symbol of the sky, kingship, the need for order? People still debate that.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Let's talk about his family and his retinue. The sources give us tons of detail here.
Right. His parents, Cronus and Rhea.
And that famous story, the blog post mentions Rhea saving baby Zeus by tricking Cronus with that stone.
Such a pivotal moment. It didn't just save Zeus, it set everything in motion for overthrowing the Titans, establishing the Olympian order.
And his siblings, quite a powerful bunch. Hestia, Hera, Demeter, Poseidon, Hades.
Each ruling their own major domain.
The Theoi project really highlights their complex relationships. Lots of clashes sometimes. Not always happy families on Olympus.
No kidding. Those interactions, siblings with their own powers and agendas. That's where so many myths come from. Exploring cooperation, rivalry, sharing power. Or not sharing it well.
Then all the consorts and kids. Divine, mortal. The list is long.
Athena, born from his head after he swallowed Metis. That's a story in itself.
Apollo and Artemis, children of Leto. Hermes, son of Maia. Dionysus, son of Semele.
And the big heroes, Heracles, Perseus.
Each one important in their own right.
It shows Zeus's influence spreading everywhere, connecting the divine and human worlds. The stories about his kids often explore heroism, divine meddling, that whole mortal-immortal intersection.
And he had quite the crew attending him. The Theoi project lists beings like Kratos' strength, Zelos' rivalry.
Nike victory by a force, guarding his throne.
Plus Hermes as his messenger, Iris as his herald, Themis, the goddess of law, as his high counselor.
And her daughters, the Fates and the Seasons, were part of that council too.
Even Hestia tending his hearth, Metis, wisdom living inside him.
Ganymede and Hebe as cupbearers, the Harpies as his hounds, Pegasus carrying the thunderbolts.
It's quite the supporting cast. Really emphasizes his status.
And highlights all the concepts tied to his rule strength, victory, law, destiny.
Okay, symbols and sacred stuff. Our sources are pretty consistent here. Thunderbolt, obviously #1. power, control.
Their eagle representing kingship, authority.
The oak tree signifying strength, endurance. We also see the royal scepter, the throne.
A miniature Nike sometimes, the Aegis, arm guard, even a cornucopia.
Visual shorthand for who he was and what he controlled.
Exactly.
His sacred animals, the eagle and the bull, connects back to myths like Ganymede in Europa.
Right. And sacred plants, the holm oak and the olive tree, linked to oracles and victory.
It grounds him in the natural world, which makes sense for how the Greeks saw divinity in nature. Now, worship and significance. The sources point to key sanctuaries. Olympia, obviously Temple of Zeus, the games.
And Dodona, with that ancient oracle, interpreting his will from rustling oak leaves.
Those places were clearly huge in ancient Greek life.
Absolutely central. For religion, for athletics, for seeking divine guidance, shows just how important Zeus was to their society and culture.
He was revered as king of the gods, god of the sky, weather, law, order, destiny, fate, kingship itself.
Pretty much covered all the bases.
The ultimate authority, controller of elements, guarantor of justice.
His influence touched almost every part of ancient Greek life, public and private.
So finally, how does he stack up against other gods? His Roman version, Jupiter.
Very similar roles and symbols, yeah. But the Theoi project notes differences in worship, like the big Pan-Hellenic Olympic Games versus more state-run Roman ceremonies.
Shows that shared background, but also how cultures adapt things differently.
Right, and the blog post touches on comparisons with other sky gods, too. Thor in Norse myth, Ra in Egypt, Indra in Hinduism.
Common themes there, like controlling weather, justice.
But unique aspects, too. Zeus's complicated relationships, Thor's role in Ragnarok, Ra's solar journey, Indra's battles.
It shows those universal human concerns, weather, power, justice, but also the amazing diversity in how different cultures imagine their gods. So wrapping up this deep dive, it's clear Zeus was hugely powerful, central to the Greek pantheon, no question.
Absolutely. Immense authority.
But as we've seen, it wasn't absolute power. He had limits, fate, older forces, other gods pushing back.
Even maybe his own human nature, attributed by the myths, and that shifting relationship with humanity.
Right. And that complexity, I think, makes him way more compelling, more thought-provoking than just some simple, all-powerful ruler.
I agree. Looking at the nuances, the contradictions, it gives us a richer understanding, not just of the myths, but of how the Greeks thought about power, authority, and the forces shaping their world.
Which brings us to our final thought for you, the listener. Thinking about all these limitations, that possible shift in the gods' influence, how do you think the ancient Greeks really saw power, both divine and human?
Was Zeus's story, with all its ups and downs, a reflection of their own understanding of authority, its strengths, its weaknesses, its boundaries?
And maybe, what parts of his story, the powerful king who still had constraints, still resonate with how we think about power dynamics today? Definitely.